Hello, today I'm going to talk about Kyle Odom and his relevance to targeted individuals. Kyle Odom of Coeur, Idaho, about 30 years old in 2016, shot Tim Remington, who is about 55 years old, 6 times in rapid fire in March 2016 at the Altar Church in Coeur, Idaho. Kyle Odom subsequently flew from Idaho on a commercial airline to Washington, D.C., where he threw a thumb drive with other information. This thumb drive had his manifesto, and he threw it on the White House lawn, and he was then immediately arrested. And it was in the news quite a bit at that time. Then it disappeared from the news. And what is interesting is that Odom has a relevant story for targeted individuals in his manifesto. I will go over some of his details which are pertinent for targeted individuals and discuss how Odom had a greater insight into the gang stalking phenomena than most realize. In Odom's manifesto, he discusses an advanced race of what he calls aliens that live and work among us humans undetected. Odom discusses that the people he calls aliens exist in all social strata and races. Now, I'll discuss Odom's manifesto, and at certain times I'll include commentary that is directly relevant to the targeted individual. Okay, the manifesto starts off with a description, starting. Who is Kyle Odom? Born and raised in North Idaho, Kyle Odom grew up in a loving family, joined the U.S. Marine Corps after high school, developed an interest in science, went to school for a degree in biochemistry, won numerous scholarships and awards, graduated magna cum laude, then got invited to a prestigious university to work on genetics. As you can see, Kyle Odom is pretty smart. He claims he's also 100% sane and 0% crazy. And Kyle Odom has here, why did he do it? Why did he shoot Pastor Tim Remington of the Altar Church in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho? Kyle claims his life was ruined by an intelligent species of amphibian humanoids from Mars. He wishes he was joking, but keep reading. And I'll keep reading here. And I'll continue with the manifesto. They were here long before we ever existed, us being humans. He claims their technology is millions of years more advanced than ours. He claims he's seen the aliens do things that defy our comprehension. Kyle claims that the aliens have a massive breeding stock of humans, which they breed and control from birth. They use these humans to live vicarious lives among us. They appear to be completely normal because they're good at imitating human behavior, Kyle claims. The Martians live deep underground here and inside our moon. The aliens take control of wild human beings, wild meaning not controlled, just a natural human, and use them as sex slaves. Don't believe me? Kyle claims. Ask President Obama to take a lie detector test on this one. Kyle claims they tried to take him, but since they were unable to control Kyle's mind, they've been following him ever since. He tried everything to get his life back, begged, bargained, and threatened. Everything Kyle Odom did was sabotage. Kyle attempted suicide twice, but they stopped him both times. Kyle's last resort was to take actions that would bring Kyle's interesting episode to the public's attention. Okay, now Kyle begins with his story, spring 2014 in Moscow, Idaho, United States. Everything started while he was at the University of Idaho. Spring 2014 was his final semester in college, and he's taking a heavy course load. He's very stressed, so he learned about meditation to help him in his stress. And he kept working on meditation techniques to achieve extreme states of consciousness. He claims this continued until one night in February 2014 when he had the most profound experience he's ever had, lying in bed. Then suddenly he left his physical body and claims he did astral travel. He entered a space that was completely dark, had no awareness of his physical boundaries or orientation. He felt peaceful until blue light began to approach him. As the blue light got closer, he realized it was another being. Once he was in the being's presence, he felt an immediate sense of wrongdoing. It felt like I was being told you shouldn't be here. He instantly conceded, felt guilty, then began to distance himself from the being. This had an impact on him and seemed to change. He says this changed the aliens' position on Kyle. So the aliens would have known about this meditation experience and the astral traveling. During this experience, his minds became connected with a being he met. He saw the being was a female. He had a euphoric, comforting, and blissful feeling. And next thing he knew, he woke up. He was in tears. And then he continued on with school. Whenever he thought of meditation, the thought was stripped from his mind. The remainder of his school semester became very simple for him. About a month later, he started interviewing at graduate schools. Shortly after interviews were done, he started receiving offers. He accepted an offer for Baylor College of Medicine to work on a PhD in human genetics. He's very excited. In July 2014 to October 2014 in Houston, Texas, Kyle claims everything changed for him once he started the program. Kyle claims the moment he arrived, he could see flaws in the professor's research. Kyle claims his mind was expanded, that he could instantly understand implications of entire research projects. This caused Kyle to be very concerned about what he was doing. He felt like he's wasting his time. He told his advisor about it, and his advisor casually brushed his concerns aside. The advisor told him, just have fun, it'll be fun. And Kyle continued on with the program. And Kyle decided then eventually to leave the program, and then the day after that his life became a living hell. He claimed he couldn't sleep and his mind felt sapped. Kyle claims he's at peace with his decision, so he knew something strange was happening to him externally. After a few days of this, two graduate students began reaching out to him, Eugene Laurie and Brandon Picard. Kyle barely knew these people, so he thought it seemed unusual they would contact him. When Kyle went to see them, they both kept pointing their finger at Kyle, saying pew pew, like they were shooting a gun. They did this over and over, and Kyle kept wondering what their problem was. Months after Kyle left Houston, he was told that Eugene and Brandon were not human. Kyle was told they were tasked with making him into the next school shooter, as they called it. He imagines this is why many of our school shootings take place. Anyway, things slowly improved after Kyle stopped talking with Eugene and Brandon. He tried to figure out what to do with his life. Claims he could barely think well. Eventually he left Texas, started applying for jobs. Then October 2014 to August 2015, Kyle went to Coeur, Idaho. And in spring 2015, Kyle secured an interview with a food company. He thought he was about to get something going on with his life, but he was wrong. He couldn't sleep at all the night before the interview. And he said after the interview, he felt fine and looked fine, and things went well. But then, after the got on the airplane, he says there was a weird story. He said Kyle went to sit on a seat that was not assigned to him, and there was a man next to him that began to telepathically manipulate Kyle. And there was someone sitting in front of Kyle that held up a newspaper that said psychic reading on it for approximately 5 minutes straight in front of Kyle. And Kyle understood that there was a message being sent to him, that he was being psychically read by these people next to him on the airplane. And Kyle bought a track phone, and then Kyle received a message out of the blue about a month after the airplane ride on his new track phone, and it said that he was to talk to a man named John Padula from the church called the Altar. And I'll just say this is that in news after that this issue was brought up, the Altar Church claims that Kyle Odom being contacted on his track phone was a wrong number, it was a mistake. That was their claim from the Altar Church. So the story continues on. Kyle claims that he went to the church and he felt very strange. He felt his life was in danger and he became uncomfortable. He says a couple days later he started receiving text messages from Tim Remington, the man that Kyle Odom would eventually shoot. And he says at first they were innocuous Bible messages, but then he started Kyle believed that the messages were threatening to him. Kyle says that Pastor Tim Remington sent messages talking about their power and other things. And Kyle claims that Remington did all this through Bible verses so that it would not look suspicious. Kyle claims he ignored everything that Pastor Tim sent until there's a final message that simply said angels. And he says after that, the next day, helicopters started flying around Kyle Odom's house all day and night. At this point, Kyle believed he was in trouble, and Kyle decided to contact the Tim Remington and the Altar Church to make an appointment to meet John Padilla for coffee. After making the appointment to meet John Padilla, something bizarre happened to Kyle. Kyle received an unnatural erection. He says it felt like someone was manually pumping blood into his penis. Immediately after that, a song began playing in his mind. Now, Kyle claims this is telepathic, and Kyle claims the lyrics went "Sister, sister, he's just a plaything. We want to make him stay up all night." Now, that's an older song from the 80s, I believe. And anyway, Kyle says he's never heard that song before, and he tried to ignore it. He says a few minutes later the song quit playing in his mind. But he says nothing happened until he tried to sleep that night. As soon as he got into bed, the song started playing again. "Sister, sister, he's just a plaything. We want to make him stay up all night." As it turned out, he didn't get any sleep, and he says that the next morning he just got up out of bed, and he says the voice claims you're going to be uncomfortable, all you have to do is breathe. And he says he's wondering what that meant and then he was told by the voice in his head, be sacrificed like Jesus and get beheaded. And that threw Kyle in a panic. His heart became racing. He started to have a mental breakdown. A few minutes later, a man knocked on Kyle Odom's door. He answered, and a man gave him a pamphlet talking about the sacrifice of Jesus. Kyle's mind started racing off control, and he became completely delirious. He thought for sure he was going to die. His thoughts shifted to his family, and all he could think about was seeing his family again. So Kyle saw his family. They were in Albuquerque, New Mexico at the time. When Kyle went to the Spokane airport, his panic subsided. When Kyle got to the plane to Albuquerque, he sat next to a huge man who Kyle claims the man kept talking to Kyle telepathically that the man was going to crash the airplane. And the man kept sniffing. And Kyle didn't know what to do, so he stayed calm, and he claims the telepathic man next to him became angry about Kyle staying calm, and the man started touching Kyle's leg. And Kyle claims the second the man would touch him, he could feel the man inside his mind. Now, I'd like to insert a commentary at this point. Now, with Kyle claiming that the telepathic man touching him, he could sense the man directly in his mind, the gang stalking night operations people, they like to touch the target individual whenever they do a night operation, and if they can get inside the sleeping area of the target individual, they want to touch the target individual because it gives them a direct, strong connection to the targeted individual that isn't in any way attenuated, or their mind link isn't weakened by distance. And that's something I learned from experience, and Kyle Odom is discussing that here. But to continue with Kyle Odom's manifesto, Kyle Odom panicked whenever the man would touch him, and Kyle was on the edge of causing a scene. Before he caused a scene, the man telepathically told Kyle Odom that he did a great job, he passed. He says, go enjoy your family. And he said, we have a job waiting for you when you get back. And Kyle continued on with seeing his family. When he went to the baggage claim, getting off the airport to see his family, he says a huge group of this network of aliens or humans that are mind controlled were surrounding him at the baggage terminal, and they kept sniffing and acting unusual. Kyle saw his parents. He went to Albuquerque, and Kyle says that the aliens kept trying to coax Kyle to go outside by himself. Kyle was scared they would kill him, so he refused. Eventually, Kyle felt threatened for his family. In other words, Kyle thought his family might be harmed by the aliens, so Kyle gave in to the telepathic aliens, and he said he would meet them by going to the church. And by that, it meant the altar in Coeur, Idaho. And when Kyle went to the altar, Kyle claims the people acted strange. He says it felt unhuman. Kyle says when he walked into the sermon room, everyone stared at him and began sniffing emphatically. Kyle felt scared, and he sat down. Someone sat next to him, and he could smell some disgusting smell. He claimed smelled like reptile vinegar. And then he left, and then Kyle understood that he wasn't dealing with any government type organization. He was dealing with something Kyle claimed was extraterrestrial. Now I'd like to input a comment here, is that I understand what Kyle is saying. This is not a governmental organization, and this is a very tightly knit group of telepathic beings, and highly organized, and when highly telepathic, and that gives them a big capability that normal humans don't have. Now, in my commentary and begin discussing the manifesto again, Kyle received no further instructions from them after that, so he began applying for jobs again. Even though Kyle felt he'd done exactly as the aliens requested of him, the aliens still followed him everywhere he went. In other words, he's being gang stalked. And as time went on, the gang stalking was day and night. Kyle began to hear voices in the head more often and began to hallucinate things that he knew weren't real. Kyle claims they started playing with him sexually, and Kyle claims the males and females would play out their sexual fantasies in his mind. This came with random and uncontrollable erections as well as extreme anal stimulation. Kyle claims the harassment continued for weeks and intensified as time went on. Kyle claims he did his best to maintain his sanity and tried to avoid the aliens. Kyle said this worked for a while, but eventually he had a, quote, huge meltdown, unquote. One day in a bakery at Safeway, when he got surrounded by a bunch of old men, some of the old men looked at him and sniffed, so he knew it was the aliens. The aliens started stimulating his penis telepathically and his anus telepathically. And then the aliens, he claims, spoke aggressively. And he says they said to Kyle, humans are nothing more than the result of a successful genetic experiment. Kyle claims the aliens said, you are a threat to the way these people think, and you can no longer be free in society. Your life is over. You are nothing but a toy. Your purpose now is their sexual enjoyment. Now, I'd like to put a comment on this. This is very interesting because Kyle Odom is claiming that the telepathic gang stalkers that he claims are aliens are telling him that humans are nothing more than a result of a successful genetic experiment. And I know that the Anunnaki crowd would like that. I find that very interesting that they would put that line in there because that backs up the Anunnaki position, and also the fact that you are a threat to the way these people think. You can no longer be free in society. That's another targeted individual thesis that you see quite a bit on the internet and YouTube, and that there's a claim that targeted individuals are real free thinkers, and that they're such truthers and free thinkers that they have to be controlled in society so that they don't harm all the sheep people that are in society. And the claim that your life is over is another targeted individual thesis. And there's a sex slave issue. So these are four things came up here in this manifesto that seem to be a common targeted individual thesis. Kyle, now continuing on with the manifesto. Kyle claims they continue to say other explicit things that were obscene, and before they finished talking to Kyle, he became angry. Kyle wanted to kill him, but he didn't, he claims. He claims he left the store to calm down. He says the rest of the night his body was telepathically manipulated, and that his penis was continually stimulated, and he couldn't stop ejaculating, and it became painful. And then Kyle decided to commit suicide. He attempted to commit suicide, but he says that he was stopped from committing suicide telepathically. And Kyle says that he committed himself into a VA mental hospital for a while, took some medication, and then left. And Kyle claims when he left the VA mental hospital, everything in his life was sabotaged. Kyle claims that the gang stalking aliens didn't want to kill him, but they just wanted him to live in a depleted state. Kyle went back to the altered church in Coeur to ask them what they wanted from him. And Kyle claims this is their response. We want you to be our sex slave, Kyle claims that the altered church mentioned. Kyle was thinking they were serious. He sat there waiting for them, the church people in the church, to do something to Kyle. All the people said was keep coming to church, so Kyle did. After a few more services, Kyle talked directly to Pastor Tim Remington face to face. Pastor Remington told Kyle that he should consider becoming a minister. And while Kyle was discussing Tim Remington, Kyle claims that Tim Remington's face changed in configuration to look like a green amphibian type face with large eyes and a pointy head and a large mouth. And that Kyle claims that only lasted for 1 or 2 seconds. And Kyle claims that after that nothing happened, except Kyle will continue going to the altar church for a few more weeks, and they kept talking to Kyle to submit and surrender. So Kyle left the church and then went back. In August 2015 to March 2016, Kyle claims that after leaving the altar church, things slowed down a little bit as far as the gang stalking, and Kyle decided to make another attempt at a normal life by pursuing a career as a pharmacist. He started taking classes at NIC to finish up his pre-requirements. He started volunteering at a local pharmacy. Kyle claims that there were several aliens in every one of his classes. Kyle claims it made it impossible for him to study. They continually harassed him. Kyle claims that in the spring 2016 semester, it was very intense. This is a quote here. Every time I go to class, they start manipulating my brain until I go into a blind rage. Sometimes they suppress my brain until I begin to black out. They also manipulate my heart rate and flood my body with adrenaline over and over again, making me extremely uncomfortable. The females stimulate my penis when they are close, and the males stimulate my anus. It's incredibly exhausting. End quote. Kyle struggled to pass his tests. Kyle claims that it was torture being in the classrooms. Kyle claims that he couldn't perform well. Kyle claims his chance of normal life was ruined. He was sleep deprived, and Kyle claims he didn't have the strength to continue. Kyle says he was too smart for his own good, so they decided to remove him from society. Kyle claims they were worried he might change the way Kyle might change the way people think, which would lead to problems. Problems in the form of scientific revolutions. If we get much smarter as a species, we're going to become a threat to the aliens' existence. Kyle claims that he's not crazy. Kyle claims the Martians are good at hiding in plain sight, that no one would know they exist unless they revealed themselves. Kyle says this is 100% real. Kyle claims that the aliens possess advanced technology far more advanced than ours. Kyle claims that President Obama is well aware of them, which is why he wrote Obama a personal letter, which he threw to the White House lawn. And Kyle believes his last resort is to take actions to the public's attention, so that's why he shot Pastor Tim Remington from the Altar Church in Coeur 6 times. And that's basically the intro of the manifesto. Now he has a question and answer part here that I want to go over. Question: why would aliens hide in his church? Answer: same reason terrorists hide in mosques. If you're going to do bad things and you want to avoid getting caught, you will put up a front to make yourself look like a good person. Question: how do you know about their technology? Answer: I have seen them use it, and they have talked to me about it. This was how I learned about their breeding stock of remote control humans. Physically, their humans are no different than us. They just lack a mind of their own. They're mind controlled. Question: why would they tell you so much? Answer: the aliens value me because I'm smart. They were also very confident they could take control of my mind, Kyle Odom claims. Turns out they couldn't. Anyway, in the interim, some of us developed a personal relationship. They were very arrogant, so they told me much more than they should have. This allowed me to understand some of the things they can do. Question: what else have you seen? Answer: I have seen them make things appear out of nowhere. One time I was sitting on a couch and a dollar bill appeared on my lap. Another time while driving they made a paper bag appear in my passenger seat. They used random unsuspecting items so no one would think anything of it. I was alone both times this happened. Kyle claims that the aliens can pop in and out of this dimension based on their other things he's seen. And he claims they're extra dimensional. They can do many things in and out of this dimension. Question: why did they target you? Answer: they targeted me following after I encountered the being through meditation. Since my mind was so expanded from the experience, they deemed me a threat to the rest of society. They thought I would change the way people think, so they decided to remove me from society. I began to have profound thoughts about genetics while I was at graduate school, which is another factor. If certain ways of thinking are allowed to exist, revolutions will take place. They could not afford for us to have a revolution in genetics. If we did, we could eliminate diseases, cancers, and many other things that plague us. They need us to remain ignorant and continue struggling, otherwise we will become a threat to them. I'd like to now that's the last question and answer here, and I'd like to put a commentary on this. I understand what Kyle Odom is saying here, and I agree with him. This group of advanced telepathic people that exist within our society, they kind of exist as a cult, and extremely secretive, highly telepathic, and they're very organized, and they blend in perfectly, practically perfectly, and it is in their favor to keep mankind from becoming too intellectually developed, because then it'd be easier for us to find and isolate these aliens and to figure out how they work and do things and uh, keep them from controlling humanity. And though I'm not going to say I agree or disagree with the fact that these people may be aliens, but they are telepathic and they are humanoids and they blend in real well and they are different. And I think that Kyle Odom is onto something here, and I think that's one of the reasons why that the whole Kyle Odom story has been brushed under the rug, and the media doesn't want to discuss him because he does bring up a lot of interesting things here that are very relevant to targeted individuals and to mankind in general. And there are some other pieces of information here, like say for example, Kyle Odom claims that there's these Martian cult members that are U.S. senators, U.S. House of Representatives, and a lot of them in Israel. And that's listed in the manifesto. And Kyle talks about early civilizations as far as around 3800 BC, before the Christian era. In Mesopotamia, there's a city called Ur. It was an important city-state at that period, located near the mouth of the Euphrates on the Persian Gulf. Kyle claims that 2 species of Martians visited Ur, which was documented by its inhabitants. Kyle claims he's contacted both these species as well. The 2 species are amphibian humanoids and reptilian humanoids. And Kyle claims humans living in Ur at 3000 BC created figurines to document what they had seen. And Kyle mentions figurines that you could search for pictures of on the internet that let you see amphibian humanoid looking people and some humanoids with gigantic eyes. Kyle claims that the Bible, the Holy Bible, was inspired by Martians, not God. Kyle claims there is no God. Kyle claims that religion was created to keep mankind divided. Let's see. Kyle claims God was a concept created by the Martians to control the minds of primitive man. Kyle claims the only good thing religion has ever brought mankind was tradition. And Kyle claims that God existing as a trinity comes from Martians. And Kyle claims that John F. Kennedy and Dwight Eisenhower were fighting the alien network. Kyle claims every U.S. president finds out that Martians are real, and that President Eisenhower warned us about them. President Kennedy stood up against them. And it goes on somewhat in some. Kyle claims that this telepathic alien network is doing this to mankind because we as a humanity rejected the aliens. In ancient Mesopotamia, Kyle claims that the aliens tried to live among us, and it never worked out, no matter how many times they tried, and it caused the aliens to develop an extreme animosity towards humans. Consequently, they have a vendetta against every wild, natural human. Kyle claims the Martians have zero self-esteem, that is why they live vicariously as humans. Kyle claims, now this is interesting, Kyle claims that these telepathic aliens can take control of wild human minds. And he says he's seen the aliens do this to multiple people, and they've done it to him as well. And Kyle claims the only time they're able to take control of his mind is when when Kyle wakes up in the middle of the night. They make him say extremely strange things, and his body flies. Parts of his body flail around uncontrollably. Kyle claims that telepathic aliens tried to take complete control of his mind on multiple occasions. While at school, they were never able to. This angered the aliens severely, which is why they caused Kyle to drop out of school. Kyle has no options in life left. Kyle claims that aliens have no intention of letting Kyle live a normal life. Okay. And I'm gonna Kyle talks a little bit more about the aliens, but I want to talk about some of the characteristics of the target individual and the telepathic aliens that Kyle's talking about. Now I'm going to start my commentary here in that I believe that Kyle was highly manipulated by the telepaths, and I strongly believe that Kyle had a strong receptivity to telepathy, and that's why they're able to make Kyle see things when Kyle was wide awake, give Kyle hallucinations, manipulate Kyle's body while Kyle was wide awake. Those are things that tell me Kyle was very much susceptible to telepathic manipulation, and it sounds more extreme than a usual case. So I think Kyle was very vulnerable to the telepathic manipulation by the gang stalkers, and I believe that the gang stalkers themselves are manipulating Kyle into kind of believing that the gang stalkers have advanced technology and that they're that they're amphibians and are reptiles and that they're from Mars. I think that's all manipulation because that supports the Anunnaki storyline that I believe some of the telepaths are trying to push. And another thing that's very important is that Pastor Tim Remington, who appears to be part of this telepathic cult network, it's very common for those people to be in these non-denominational evangelical churches because it lets them do their thing in an uncontrolled environment. Because if they're part of Catholics or part of an Orthodox church or a Protestant mainline denomination, they'd be highly restricted in what they do, and there would be people looking over them, and they don't want that. They want to have free reign, and having a non-denominational church gives the telepathic cult a safe haven to operate from, so they can do what they want to do privately to people. And Tim Remington has been given a lot of press time due to the fact that he's involved in street ministry in California and that he's been involved in a lot of drug rehabilitation work with people, and that's part of the telepathic cult network recruiting people. That's how they do it. They'll be, let's say for example, there's 10 people they got in rehabilitation. They might try to get 1 or 2 people to become a true believer, someone that's going to do whatever the church wants them to do due to the programming of the rehabilitation. So it's really, the whole church setup is how they run their operation. Not all of it, but just part of it. And that's how they get a lot of people in their network. So that's important to understand also. And so what we have with Kyle Odom is a young man that was taken advantage of due to his susceptibility to telepathy. They tried to control him. The telepathic gang stalkers tried to control him. They couldn't, so they decided to try to destroy Kyle Odom. Kyle Odom tried to fight back by shooting Tim Remington, who was a local leader of this telepathic cult network, and a light worker, you could say. And that's it. I think it's an unfortunate situation, but I think it's very relevant to targeted individuals. And I'll discuss this a little bit later also. Thank you.